hope everybody feels fired up, inspired, ready to go back and do the work. Welcome to our Friday plenary. We're very, very excited to have a distinguished panel of speakers with us today. We got a few things that we want to share with you. So to kick things off, I'm going to hand the mic to Dr. Emilio Zamora.
Thank you. We're going to be making announcements. We have two distinguished visitors that I need to acknowledge. Former Senator Gonzalo Barrientos from this area. He consistently supported CMAS throughout his tenure at the legislature, and he is partly responsible, along with David Montejano, for the idea of the 10% plan that went through the legislature and became a bill. Alejandro Alex Moreno, former legislator from the Valley, was here. There he is. He is one of the co-founders of MASO, along with David Montejano, and then Mayo. And he was also associated with the farm worker strike of the 1960s against the melon producers in the Valley. And he was also very involved with the organization. What was the organization, Alex? Anyway, he's been an activist in our community, very successful. Thank you for being with us.
And Chuy Ramirez.
Okay, well, other people are, yeah, Chuy Ramirez, an author, and also, he was one of the youngest activists in the Mayo movement in 1970, 69, 70, from the Valley. He has a very important blog, and he's just published a book on the walk out of mental shelter. He has 3 other books.
Thank you.
All right, please welcome Dr. Angela Valenzuela, who's going to make some announcements.
Yeah, thanks everybody. I know like you, we're all inspired, but we also are moved. But we also have to take advantage of this opportunity to organize. Ethan he presented, and in his presentation he said that we should have an open letter as Chicano, Chicana, Latinx historians and friends and colleagues. And so we need everybody's emails. There was no registration for this conference, and so we want to take advantage of the fact that you are all here. It's not a commitment to sign the letter, it's a commitment to be in conversation about the letter, upon which later you may or may not want to sign it. We have to decide whether it goes to the president or to the Board of Regents, but you know, those are the kinds of details we can work out in community and conversation dialogue. Gracias. Thank you so much.
Yeah, there's too many of really brilliant, intelligent people here to not take advantage of the brain trust that is in this room. God, please help me save my home in malls. Right. I can't say it any other way. But I want to do some acknowledgments, some thank yous. There was a lot of people that made this possible, and I think it's important to name them. First off, CJ, can you everybody clap for CJ, please? Annalise, Paul, and I could not have done it without CJ. Excellent guidance. I'm so glad that he signed on to this. You know, he told us in the beginning, never would I do something like this with grad students. But it's with y'all, so I trust that y'all are going to do good work. It's been paraphrased a little bit, but I hope we made you proud, boss. So CJ, we got Annalise, we got Paul, we got myself. I want to say thank you to Sue, Aldrich, Karma, Gabby DeVille, Margaret Fisher, Monica Flores, Luis Guevara. These are all the people that work at malls, right? The staff here that make it all possible. Everything, like the way the room's set up, all of you have got hotel reservations or honorary or any of that stuff. They took care of that. They made sure that happened, and we were able to have this day together. So everybody, please clap for our fearless leader, Karma. And then I have a few people that, without their financial support, without their advertisement, we could not have made this happen. First goes to Dr. Carlos Kevin Blanton. You donated your own research funds to help make this happen. We got Maggie Rivas and CMOS. Maggie also helped make this happen. Thank you, Maggie. We got Caro Redondo, everybody, thank you again. We got John McKiernan Gonzalez, Dr. McKiernan Gonzalez, where are you at? In the Center for the Study of Southwest? We've got Resistencia Bookstore, who's tabling outside. They've got some good old used books for you. They are a local resistance bookstore here in Austin. Go buy stuff from them, help keep them around. We've got UT Press. Oh, look, all these people here. All these people here. Everybody here. So, Frontera Scholars with Dr. Cortez, Latino Studies. We've got Mexican America, CIMAS, Latino Research Institute, Humanities Institute. As you can all see, there's a very broad level of support here to make all of this happen. And so I just want to make sure that I spend enough time with all looking at that and recognizing that this was a village effort. And so, yeah, thank you all. Thank you to everybody. And thank you, Carmen.
So I feel like it's important to say.
I got Maribel. Oh my God.
So sorry.
No, you don't have to be sorry at all.
I was like, wait. Okay. So sorry. Hello, everyone.
Hi.
Very nice to be in this room with so many distinguished people. I'm Maribel Falcon, the librarian for Latino Studies at the Benson Latin American Collection, and we just wanted to take a minute to announce a very exciting new opportunity. Because of Dr. Montejano, we are announcing the Montejano Benson Collection Research Award. We're very grateful to Dr. Montejano and his wife Veronica Montejano for their contribution to us. We will announce a fellow this year. The preference will be given to early career professors, assistant professors, and graduate students. And the purpose of the research will be Mexican American and Latino history. So please keep a lookout for the opportunity to apply, and we're very excited and honored and grateful to Dr. Montejano. Thank you to everybody.
Very exciting stuff. So what I was going to say is I just feel like we're probably over fire capacity. So just note there's an exit there and an exit there and an exit there. Well, no, it is in fact an exit.
Llega la migra.
It is an exit, trust me. Get outside that way. So just, for safety. So it's great to see you all. My name is Carmen Chavez. I'm the chair of the Department of Mexican American and Latino Studies, a professor in the department. I've been here at UT for 10 years, and I'm delighted to get to moderate this panel. Before I introduce the panelists, not that they actually need any introduction, but I'll still do the honor. I wanted to take a moment to pause on how fortuitous this moment is. We're here to celebrate the significance of Professor Montejano's field-defining book, Anglos and Mexicans, a book that changed the way people think about Texas history, the relationships between economics and race, the dynamic between whites and Mexican-descended peoples. And we're doing so at the University of Texas at Austin just a week after the university announced that it would be eliminating the Department of Mexican American and Latino Studies.
Boo.
Shame.
Shame.
We will be consolidated into a new department of social and cultural analysis. What a perfect time to get righteously angry and send a letter to the president and provost. So if you haven't done that on our behalf, we go ahead and encourage you to do that. Let them know how you feel about this, in addition to a collective letter. It's also a perfect time to support the Students for a Democratic Society. So, there's my friends back there. So, these young people over there, mostly Latino-led, by the way, not entirely, but a lot of Latinos are putting their tails on the line to defend the interests of ethnic and gender studies on this campus. They are fearless, and they are, I'm really proud to work with them. I'm proud to know them. I'm proud to learn from them. And it's a continuation of the great tradition of student activism, which of course our colleagues here represent as well. You guys have a protest coming up. Did you want to say?
Yeah, so next Thursday on the 26th, 5 p.m. at the UT Tower, we're going to have a march, right, in the opposition of the elimination of the ethics departments. Y'all can show up. We hope you guys can show up. We have a table outside too if you have more information, if you want to get in contact with us. Yeah, we've been campaigning for this since last semester. We've been trying to get the word out. We know that UT admins have been very secretive about their plans, so we've been trying to work in direct opposition to that by doing outreach about what's happening. So please support us in any way you can. We have a table out there. Show up to our rallies if you can. Thank you so much. We appreciate y'all.
Thank you, students, for your leadership and for showing faculty what courage looks like, because they need the lesson. All right. So here's how this panel is going to go. I think you guys have been asked to speak about 15, 20 minutes. Is that accurate? They all said 20. Is anyone surprised about that? So I'm going to hold up a sign facing them at 15 minutes to let them know they have 5 minutes left. And we'll see how that goes. So they're going to speak about 20 minutes. And then, if that actually happens, then I plan to facilitate a little bit of questions that I have based on their work and based on the conversation, and then open the floor to y'all to ask questions. I will say, and Pauline, you're going to get mad at me, Annalise probably won't care, but if they go long, which they might, I will just open it up to you so that you have an opportunity to engage with these amazing thinkers. So let me briefly introduce them. You could read in the program, of course, but it's worth me speaking their bios as well. So I'm going to read them last. So I'm going to start with Professor Neil Foley, who holds the Robert and Nancy Dedman Endowed Chair in History at Southern Methodist University, where he teaches courses on the changing constructions of race, citizenship, and transnational identity in the U.S.-Mexico borderlands. He served as a professor of history at UT for many years before moving to SMU. He's the author of numerous articles and books, including Mexicans in the Making of America and The White Scourge, Mexicans, Blacks, and Poor Whites in the Cotton Culture of Texas. His current research focuses on migration, citizenship, and right-wing populist movements in 21st century U.S. and Europe. I'm excited about that. I'm also going to introduce someone who needs no introduction, Emilio Zamora, who held the Clyde Rapp Littlefield Chair in Texas History at the University of Texas at Austin, where he was affiliated with the Center for Mexican American Studies and the Lozano Long Institute for Latin American Studies. He's a lifetime member of the Texas Institute of Letters and a lifetime fellow of the Texas State Historical Association, where he also served as president from 2019 to 2020. 1919. He's a co-founder and continuing convener of Academia Quatli, a cultural revitalization program in Austin for 4th and 5th grade students. He's authored or collaborated on 12 books and more than 30 articles and book chapters, earning 12 scholarly awards. His recognitions included the 2017 Scholar of the Year Award from the National Association of Chicano and Chicano Studies, the 2017 Knox Texas Foco Premio Estrella de Aslan Lifetime Achievement Award, and the 2019 Ruth A. Allen Pioneer in Texas Working Class History Award from the Texas Center for Working Class Studies at Collin College. And then another person who needs no introduction, Professor David Montejano, professor of the Graduate School of the University of California, Berkeley. Previously, he was professor of ethnic studies and history and chair of the Center for Latino Policy Research. He joined the Berkeley faculty in 2002. Before coming to Berkeley, he was an associate professor of history and sociology and director of CMOS at UT Austin. Professor Montejano's major areas of interest include comparative and historical sociology, political sociology, social change, Race and Ethnic Relations and Community Studies, a native of San Antonio, here in a BA from UT Austin, and 2 masters and a PhD from Yale. Of course, he's the author of the prize-winning historical overview, Anglos and Mexicans, Making in Texas, 1836 to 1986, published by UT Press in 1987. Among the recognition received were the Frederick Jackson Turner Prize, awarded by the Organization of American Historians for the best first book in American history, and the T.R. Fernbach Prize, awarded by the Texas Historical Commission for the best book in Texas history. Anglos and Mexicans is now in its 14th printing and has been translated and published in Mexico. Will you all please join me in welcoming our panelists? Who's supposed to go first?
Emilio.
Thank you for the opportunity, and I'm so glad to be participating in this. David and I are, of course, longtime friends. I think we met around 1971. I've been doing some research and discovered some things I knew and some things I didn't know. He's one of the co-founders of MASO, the Mexican American Student Organization, the first student or activist organization after an earlier one, but this was the one that then led to the formation of the Mexican American Youth Organization. And of course, he was also a co-founder of CIMAS and director of CIMAS for a period of time. Much of what I had to say has already been said and done probably better than I could. So I'm going to read some things, other things that I wrote. Luckily, I think I have enough for 20, maybe 25 minutes. A longtime friend, trusted colleague, and scholar David, whose extraordinary body of work has earned him lasting and deserving distinction. His scholarship has not only reshaped our understanding of multiple areas of study, it has also expanded the intellectual horizons of this university and the nation. And it's important to say this at this moment. His work stands as a testament to rigor, courage, and a steadfast commitment to truth and progressive change. We celebrate such exemplary scholarship at a moment of institutional reckoning. The University of Texas at Austin, an institution that has benefited greatly from the labor, creativity, and democratizing spirit of scholars like David, now stands at a crossroads between the tradition of academic freedom for research and teaching, for free speech and civil discourse, and on the other hand, the abusive use of concentrated power and authority that whitewashes learning and knowledge and diminishes trust in its leadership. The in-your-face consolidation and possible dismantling of programs and intellectual spaces that many of us have spent decades building raises serious concerns about process, transparency, and respect for academic freedom. Too often, the precious knowledge produced by minority and women scholars has been undervalued, treated as contingent rather than central to the university's mission. We see once again how fragile recognition can be when equity is not structurally secured. We also see the privilege of power that carries with it a profound responsibility to act with even-handedness and justice. The powerful have clearly abdicated that responsibility here, and they cannot claim that they did not know what they were doing, what they have done. Social causes like ours have long urged them to uphold the enduring principles of equality, charity, and freedom. They also know that absolute and unchecked power inevitably corrupts. And in their conduct, the powerful are broadcasting their own downfall, while affirming our even greater responsibility to press forward with our righteous causes for the sake of humanity. Neither history nor the memory of their children or their children's children will judge them kindly. David's accomplishments in this symposium in his honor deserve unqualified respect. It is therefore deeply disappointing that alongside this tribute, the Civitas Institute has chosen to stage a competing event purporting to tell us what Latinos need and want. This is not a coincidence. Such gestures remind us that the struggles over who has authority to speak for our communities and whose knowledge counts is ongoing. Throughout his academic career, David has championed the cause of social justice with some sacrifice that few fully appreciate. I think we need to talk about these things, including the university's refusal to promote him to full professor while he was here. Its denial of the customary one-year paid leave after he stepped down as director of CIMAS. A courtesy routinely extended to other faculty. And then lastly, its failure to present the competitive counteroffer to Berkeley's generous recruitment package. That's when we lost them. How do we understand this as anything other than a pattern of institutional disregard for highly acclaimed scholarship that unsettles comfortable narratives and challenges entrenched hierarchies? David is especially remembered at the University of Texas for his bold and effective leadership as the director of CIMAS. Among his many achievements are his authorship of the idea that became the 10% Plan, his successful efforts to secure legislative funding for CIMAS, direct funding, his contributions to our Texas Foco, our state chapter of Knox, his active and vocal presence in the university community, including his many tardeadas he's hosted at his home that brought students, faculty, organizers, and policymakers into shared conversation. Some of you may remember that. Those gatherings are more than social occasions. They were incubators of ideas, spaces of mentorship and strategy where scholarship made and met community, and where intellectual conversation and debate was grounded in friendship. We must not forget that. Politics is personal. Friendship, solidarity, and purpose. His success and that of so many others who built this powerhouse of an intellectual and political space at UT Austin explains the reaction we are witnessing and challenging in real time. So now finally I turn to your book. I had to say those things. We have to use our words. We tell our children that. Don't you remember? You know, don't just feel and express your feelings with your, use your words. It's a landmark, a turning point in the history of Texas, Mexicans, the Southwest, the border region, and racialized class relations. The folks have already spoken about that at length. Its overarching thesis is that the class and racial system imposed on Mexicans after annexation emerged from distinct class and racial orders, with the farm order proving especially consequential in the historical trajectory he traces. The book is clearly written, deeply insightful, thorough, and nuanced in its explanations, comparatively insightful in its frequent social and economic development, and ambitious in both chronological scope and conceptual reach. Particularly notable is its skillful tracing of the evolution of racial thought across distinct phases of Texas socioeconomic transformation. It illuminates moments of tension and transition in both rural and urban social structures, while offering a penetrating account of how race and class shape political behavior within Mexican American communities and in their interactions with Anglo power structures. The book is one of those rare works that substantially reshapes our understanding of history writ large, as well as its more immediate configurations. David's global framing, which lends the study its wide comparative reach, draws on major scholars, and I'll move on. I won't take time with that. David's broad treatment of historical change took on particularly compelling form when he integrated the vast archival materials that the labor economist Paul Taylor compiled in the 20s and 30s. His work, however, was limited, and David, I think, took it farther than Taylor had been able to do. Like other groundbreaking works, Anglos and Mexicans also emerged from among us, namely the flourishing body of historical scholarship on Mexicans, professional work stretching from the early contributions of Jovita González, Mireles, George I. Sanchez, and Americo Paredes, to the later studies by Ernesto Galarza, Rodolfo Acuña, Juan Gómez Quiñones, Marta Cotera, Guadalupe San Miguel, Irene Ledesma, we gotta use their words, Antonia Castañeda, Arnoldo de León, Armando Alonso, Cynthia Orozco, Doug Foley, and yours truly, including the Chicano Political Economy Collective at Berkeley, that spearheaded his work, as well as of others like, and this is not a complete list, I'm sure, of course, Mario Barrera, Felipe González, Patricia Sabella, Andrés Jiménez, Larry Trujillo, Margarita Desierdo, who's here with us at the front, Christine Sierra, and Tomás Almaguer. This lineage marked a natural progression in the field's development, while David's book stood apart from others, especially with the explanation that distinct forms of racial thinking corresponded with those 4 stages of development. I'll also say something about my use of the book in my classroom. One of the things I really like about this book, especially as an instructor, is that it offers very clear explanations for such things as race and racial thinking and the way it intersects with class. And it offers really meticulous descriptions of instances in which race emerges out of the tension that comes naturally with the development of commercial agriculture. Let me skip this. Now for a little bit of the personal. Let me see. I don't know if you remember, David, but I wanted to add this. I thought it was, at least in my memory, very important. I was visiting at Berkeley for 1 year, and I remember our conversation with David soon after his book had been published and the good reviews that started to come in. You remember that? 1987. We're on the way to you giving a talk to an audience there in Berkeley. It was 87, as I recall, during the early part of the fall semester. We were on the Berkeley campus and on our way to a place where David was going to give a talk on his celebrated book. I remember that David noted that he felt a bit uneasy because the attention that he was receiving was so sudden in his mind. Coming as it did after so many friends and colleagues had doubted that he had it in him to finish the book. I offered words of encouragement. He went on to give a great talk on the book. In academia, it is all too easy to become consumed by deadlines, expectations, and the constant dread of wondering how our work will be received. In those moments, our frayed sensibilities can spill onto others, turning understandable stress into unnecessary harm. This perniciousness is harmful enough when we must take care of ourselves. It can turn destructive when we place these uncertainties on others. As second-wave feminists famously recognize the personal as political, our individual struggles are inseparable from the structures and communities in which we live and work, as Marta said earlier. David's career reminds us how to navigate these pressures with integrity, generosity, and courage. He has shown that we can pursue excellence, confront injustice, and nurture community all at once. In honoring David today, we are reminded that the measure of a scholar is not only in the ideas produced, but in the humanity with which one uplifts others, sustains dialogue, and strengthens the institutions that shape our collective future. So, congratulations, David.
I'm very nervous sitting up here because I am myself a fan of these two scholars' work, and kind of wonder why I'm even sitting up here, to be quite honest with you. So it's an honor. And before I explain that, I just want to say thank you to CJ and to Paul and Eden and Annalise and the staff that supported them, and all of you for being here. And I especially want to just turn and look at David and say thank you, because I'm going to say some things about why I think I am up here, even though I still can't believe I'm up here. Because my story is quite a bit different, I think. There's a talk we heard from the eminent Marta Cotera about the ways in which you need to be connected to our communities and so forth. I didn't grow up in a community like this. I did not have that.
Northeast.
I grew up in Alexandria, Virginia,
Oh, yeah.
in the state that was the capital of the Confederacy. My mother is from a family from Chihuahua that crossed the border at Palomas. Ramon Gutierrez is probably one of the few people in the room who probably knows where that is. And settled in the southern part of the state. And I still have a lot of family there, so I visited them now. And I had no concept of what it meant to be a Mexican American. That was only something that happened in our household because my mother was a native speaker of Spanish. My father spoke Spanish too. He was from an Irish immigrant family from County Kerry. I actually have Irish citizenship. My mother taught us all about, growing up in New Mexico and in Chihuahua. Her family was half born in Chihuahua, other half born in New Mexico. And it was always intriguing to me as I got older that I knew nothing about that part of the world. You grow up in the United States and you're learning about Anglo societies in the Trans-Mississippi East, specifically New England, right? And then the South, right? And so I was abroad for 10 years. I left when I was 25, and I came back when I was 34, so 9.5 years to go to University of Michigan to get a PhD. So I wanted to do something with Mexican American history. I didn't even know where they were, except they were in the border states, right? I knew they were near Mexico. I had never visited Texas. I mean, I'd never gone to Arizona, and I'd never gone to California, right? So I did not know how to do history either because my undergraduate degree was in English literature at UVA. And then I studied an MA at Georgetown in Renaissance studies, so please ask me about Shakespeare or Marlowe or the Elizabethan worldview. But I never even heard the word Tejano or anything. And I got to graduate school, and this is sort of I'm thinking of Dr. Carlos Blanton's story about how he first read Anglos and Mexicans in the making of Tenex when he was 22. I was 37, right? I came back when I was 35 years old, enrolled in the Michigan American Studies program. I have no degrees in history. I had never studied history. The only history I had in college was the 2-semester course on U.S. history, the certification. I hated it. I got a C in both semesters. It was boring. And I thought there were no Latinos. The Latinos who were at Michigan at the time, a lot of them were international students from Latin America, right? And there was nobody for me to connect with as a professor until I met Rebecca Scott, who was actually a year younger than me and is a Latin American historian of 19th century Cuba. And I told her I wanted to do something with Mexican American history. She said, well, okay, we'll see what we can do out of my Latin American history class. And I don't know how I ended up with Texas, but I will tell you that I took a research course with her, and she sent me to the National Archives to do the Freedmen Bureau's papers after the emancipation of, proclamation. And I'm looking at how African Americans and freedmen and formerly enslaved people are building schools and so forth and so on. And there was one example in one of the Freedmen reports that came out monthly for years that said, we had to deal with this plantation owner, and I think it was in Caldwell County, right? It's pretty close to overlap with David Montejano's book, about which we know very much now, and have known. And it was a black and a brown, a Mexican, leaving the plantation to go down the road a bit to another place. They had the freedom to do that. Well, the owner pulls out his revolver and shoots the black man. Wounds him almost mortally, but he survived. But he didn't shoot the Mexican. And my thought was, I always thought Mexicans were like down on the border doing, growing onions and things in the agricultural region that David wrote about in the book. I knew nothing about that at the time because his book hadn't come out, right? His book came out the following year. And when his book came out and I started to read about this, all of a sudden a light went off in my head. And I said, I'm not going to do New Mexico. I didn't know why I was going to do New Mexico. I had no reason except my mother was New Mexican. But what I did know is I grew up around black people, right? In Washington, D.C., where I went to high school, went to a Jesuit high school, 2 blocks from the U.S. Capitol. And so I thought, well, this resonates. I got a black person, a Mexican person who bolted and paid the price, right? And so I'm going to study this. And that little opening got me into learning about sharecropping and tenant farming, the agricultural ladder. And I had no idea how to write history. I had no idea about capitalist development. I don't even know if I could have defined capitalism in any intelligent way, except to say it's about profit making and this is what corporations do and all of that. When I read this book, and before I tell you about what happened, I will tell you that I had all by myself and nobody else to talk to read Al Camarillo's book, right? Because these are books that came out before 1987 when his book came out. And I read books by and articles by Juan Gomez Quinones, Mario Garcia, John Chavez, Los Leon, Arnoldo de Leon, Rudy Acuna, Don Americo Paredes. But there was nobody reading those books in the graduate schools anywhere, or any of the professors, including my own advisor. And none of them resonated with me because they were not my community, they were not my people. I didn't even know who my people were. You see. So, his book, David's book, gave me the idea that I could write about race and class in this area of Central Texas, where the U.S. South, which I did know something about because everybody studies the South in graduate school, undergraduate school. I read Faulkner as an undergraduate and so forth. And I knew about sort of sharecropping. And I was learning a lot about the American Southwest, which is very different geophysically, flora and fauna, etc. I've got 8 minutes left before the 15-minute buzzer goes off. And I thought, if I just follow in his footsteps, I can do this, right? I have a map. I know, how he used sociology to form a macro kind of thing that I didn't even know what sociologists did, right, frankly. They did something with society, but I had no idea what. And I'm being very serious here. I was extremely naive about everything, okay, except literature. And growing up on the East Coast, inside the Beltway, stone's throw from Washington, D.C., from the Capitol, okay? My father was a Spanish translator for the FBI. Okay, and he was not doing the criminal stuff, he was doing national security, listening to Spanish language communications between embassies and the home countries, right? So that's kind of interesting. He was a closeted left-winger because he had to be in the FBI of J. Edgar Hoover. And also he was sequestered in a separate building where they had all the listening devices and so forth. So he was not wearing an FBI windbreaker going out arresting people and stuff. He was a very quiet, intellectual, shy Irishman. So at 37 years old, I read this book. And it just changed my life in many ways. I started to do the research. I used his bibliography to start looking at some of those sources. And I thought, I can build on this book and build a story of this Central Texas Blackland Prairie, county by county, right? Do the sort of empirical work that he did, right? I love those graphs that Carlos put up about the tractors, because when I finished my dissertation, which was called The New South and the Southwest, not the white scourge, right? It was about how the New South came to the Southwest, right? In the area between Houston and San Antonio. I think there's gotta be, that's where it shifted. That's where the line is drawn. The far western frontier, the cotton frontier, right? Wouldn't go west of that, right? And west of that was ranching. And that was where black and white met Anglo and Mexican, right? And I might add indigenous as well, but that we're not talking about that, but we need to be talking more about that, and that comes later. And about African Americans, right? Because they may not have been in the valley very much, but they were in Central Texas big time because it was the far edge of the cotton thing. This is why my subtitle is Mexicans, Blacks, and Poor Whites in the culture. And my dissertation was a political economy. It read more like, well, I won't compare myself to the great, inimitable, and incomparable David Montejano. But I mean, it was, according to my brothers and sisters, I have 7 brothers and sisters, and 2 of them looked at my bound dissertation copy, and they said, I've never seen anything more boring in my life. I mean, I had a graph of all the dots of where all the cotton things were moving, and another graph, or one of those XY things, with all the dots for the ranching, and you turn the pages and you could see that cotton's going this way and ranching's going that way, And my brother said, what the hell, I just don't know that you would be counting cows and ranches and stuff. You came all the way back from Europe and Asia. You spent 6 years, 7 years in Asia, in Europe, and 2 and 3 years in Japan to study cows?
It's all about the cows.
I was like, geez, do they have a point? I mean, this isn't Shakespeare. But this book was my Bible. It's like what Eden said this morning, right? Resonated with me. The only difference is David's book was telling the story of his life, right? And it was telling me how to write about a community about which I know nothing, right? But that I really felt passionate about learning. So that's why I'm here.
I'm going to stand up because I want to see people in the back. I just see heads, and I don't know if I need this. But I want to thank.
Can we turn off the projector? Yeah, that way we can see your face, please.
Yeah, oh yeah. That's a good idea.
Wait, like the lettering on your face. Your dementia.
Did you? I could move out of the way.
There we go.
I want to thank the organizers of this symposium. Obviously I'm honored. I'm blown away, really. Thank you, CJ Alvarez, Carmen Chavez, the graduate students, Ethan Peña, Paul Del Bosque, Annalise Martinez. You guys have done a great job. And graduate students have, traditionally, there's a historical role for graduate student activism in sponsoring and organizing these kind of events, and even in hiring professors like myself. I mean, when I was hired at Berkeley the first time, it was due to graduate student activism. And I think graduate student activism is something that we have to understand is very significant, very important. And that's why I'm going to give you a sketch of what's happened the last 40 years, but then I challenge the current graduate students to flesh it out. It's just a sketch, but there's much more to analyze and recover. I'm grateful also that we're celebrating the 40th anniversary instead of waiting for the 50th. What's up? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Yeah. I'm glad we're celebrating the 40th anniversary rather than waiting for the 50th. And although I think 10 years from now, we should all gather again, those of us who will be around and assess where we are. And I have no doubt that it will be some Latino Studies gathering that will do that. You know, I have no question about that. But let me, I was asked, Ethan in particular asked me to, if I had to write another chapter or a postmortem over the last 40 years, what would I say? And so this is a sketch. And some of these points I've written about already in several essays, but let me sort of summarize them now. And the previous panelists were correct. I mean, I ended Anglos and Mexicans on a high note, on a somewhat optimistic note. I was emphasizing the importance of the election of Henry Cisneros as a turning point, first mayor of Mexican descent since Juan Seguin in the 1840s. And I also noted the formation of several important cultural and civic organizations that were born during the Chicano movement. The Mexican American Legal Defense Fund, Southwest Voter Registration, Education, the Guadalupe Cultural Center, communities organized for public service, and so on. I mean, organizations and institutions that did not exist before the 1960s. And so things look sort of rosy, you know, in 1986. And as a matter of fact, they look so rosy that Southwest Voter and cops decided to take they thought things were settled in Texas, and they took their organizing to California. So they moved their headquarters to LA. So what has happened then? I mean, how do we count for, I guess what some would consider to be reversals, you know, during the last 4 decades? Well, I point to 2 events, and both of them taking place outside of Texas. One has to do with the success of Proposition 187 in California in 1994. Proposition 187 was an anti-immigrant initiative that mandated that teachers and hospital medical personnel actually report on suspected illegal or undocumented immigrants. This proposition passed with 60% of the vote in supposedly liberal California. I happened to be spending a year in California at the time, and I witnessed these citizen councils protesting outside of job corners with signs that said, "Don't make Mountain View a third world city," and go back to Mexico. It was an intensely a bitter campaign, a hateful one, a nasty one that Governor Pete Wilson, at the time very unpopular, seized on to make as the major platform of his re-election campaign. He seized on it and rode to an easy victory. So now that success, the passage of Prop 187, set off some contradictory efforts. On the one hand, it woke up the sleeping giant in California. Latino activists, especially those in the labor movement, began to launch voter registration campaigns and, importantly, naturalization campaigns. And I think you can see the results of those efforts now. All the top officials in the state of California are Democrats, and undoubtedly the Latino caucus is the most influential caucus in California. I mean, we have Senator Alex Padilla, for example, and there have been a number of leaders of the state assembly. On the other hand, the other lesson that came through with Proposition 187, a contradictory one, was that Republican operatives, noting the successful re-election of Governor Pete Wilson on the basis of an anti-immigrant message, saw that scapegoating immigrants could become a winnable political strategy. And this emboldened the cultural conservative wing of the Republican Party, at the time led by Patrick Buchanan, who has written about Latinos, called us an anti-nation or national group within the nation. Now, this lesson was muted in Texas at the time because we had an affable slap on the back, very drinking governor, who campaigned throughout Texas with Emilio and tried to speak Spanish on occasion. I'm talking, of course, of Governor W. Bush, George W. Bush. At the time that Republican Governor Wilson is scapegoating Mexican immigrants, Republican Governor Bush is warning the Republican Party here in the state against Mexico bashing. And of course, you can understand, we can get more into that. You know, George Bush's brother was married to a Mexicana, the little brown ones and so forth. I'm sure you all remember those comments. In any case, things looked promising when George W. was elected president. It was on the verge of signing some important binational agreements with President Fox of Mexico. Then the second critical event happened. I'm talking, of course, of September 11, 2001, when the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center were brought down. This was a traumatic moment for the country, and it clearly heightened the fear of the other, the fear of the outsider. The anti-immigrant wing of the Republican Party seized the opportunity to press forward their policies. Now, the most influential or most eloquent exponent of these views was National Security Advisor and Professor Samuel Huntington of Harvard University. Before 9/11, Huntington had warned about a clash of civilizations with the Muslim world. Muslims posed the external threat to the United States, he argued. Then after 9/11, he followed with another book titled, Who Are We? In this book, he argued that Mexicans and Latinos in general posed the internal threat to the United States, and that the Anglo-Saxon core, those are, Anglo-Saxon is this term, by the way, so Anglo is coming back. The Anglo-Saxon core of the United States was under siege. He labeled Mexican Americans as, quote, Mexicans not born in Mexico. And he said that the true Native Americans were the descendants of the Mayflower. Huntington was the intellectual who tied the Muslims and Mexicans as threats to the United States, an association that widely circulates today in right-wing groups. And I'm sure you remember the rhetoric that you heard from President Trump regarding Muslims and, of course, Mexicans. As we know, 9/11 led to the disastrous Iraq War based on bogus claims about weapons of mass destruction. Yet somehow in the midst of this, Barack Hussein Obama becomes elected president in 2008. Many of us thought we were now in a post-racial order. I certainly did. I thought we had finally crossed the line. Again, we lulled ourselves into complacency, unaware of the racist reaction to Obama's presence. The further suspicion propagated by the future presidential candidate Donald Trump was telling. Nearly 1/3, I studied this. I mean, I tried to understand. I had to try to understand. I was trying to cover I was trying to explain why I had been so optimistic in Anglos and Mexicans, and now everything looked negative. And so I'm trying to explain this. And so I studied, I did some research, and I found that concerning the birther, the claim that Obama was born in Kenya was actually believed by 1/3 of the registered Republicans. 1/3. This, I would argue that 1/3 constitutes Trump's MAGA base, you know, I mean. So Trump wins the presidency in 2016, and basically I see him as the anti-Obama. He shocks everyone with his blatant anti-immigrant message and his call to build the wall. And now we've been hearing this anti-immigrant rhetoric for the past 10 years. And I think we've seen the results of that kind of rhetoric in the streets of Minnesota and elsewhere. So we are in difficult times. One often draws comparisons with the 1950s. McCarthyism and the Red Scare at that time dominated the political climate. There were book burnings, book bans, Hollywood producers who were blacklisted, The Salt of the Earth, I think a documentary movie that most of us are familiar with, was banned. The actors, the heroine was Rosada Sanchez, was deported. Operation Wetback was in full swing, much like ISIS today. And Operation Wetback was run in a military style. It was run by a former commandant of the Marines. You find agents sweeping through neighborhoods, knocking on doors. Children going to school had to carry passports. Reported 1 million Mexicans were deported. Now, often overlooked when we talk about Operation Wetback, and I think it's important that we recognize this, is that it was initially supported by the American GI Forum. Okay. Of course, they reversed the position once they saw the impact of the deportations. Now, however, in spite of the comparison to the 1950s, I think the differences are stark with today. 70 years later, we are better organized, we have more resources, are better formed, are wealthier, we're better educated, we have professional academic organizations, we have high elected officials. Besides Senator Padilla, we have Senator Gallego from Arizona, Senator Ben Lujan from New Mexico, not to mention any number of congressional representatives. And of course, most notable is the presence of women in elected leadership positions. Assimilation happens. We speak and write in English. Intermarriage happens. If you look at Los Angeles, 1/3 of Latinos are marrying outside the group. So, what do we call this integration? Do we call this inclusion? Do we call this progress? I will leave that for the graduate students to decide. but some evidence of inclusion, or whatever we call it, is ironic. I think of the fact that 60% of the Border Patrol today are Mexican American.
Yeah.
I still can't digest the meaning of that fully, but certainly it's a sign of integration of some sort. Maybe not the kind that we would like, but nonetheless, it's a sign that we have found a niche within the federal government. But there are many other questions that arise. In Anglos and Mexicans, towards the back, and I don't know which page it is on, I have a map of all the voting right lawsuits that Southwest Voter and MALDIF brought up. And there must be some 80 lawsuits that were filed within a 10-year period. Each of those lawsuits, and these are mainly rural counties or rural cities, represented a local social movement that had an impact. But we don't know where they are today. We don't know what happened. We don't know, we don't have those stories. We know more about San Antonio, obviously, but what happened in Lockhart, what happened in outside of Lubbock, for example. We just don't know. So what we see is a complicated picture that needs untangling. We need to revisit the classic work that David Gutierrez wrote called Walls and Mirrors. And by that he meant, he's looking at how Mexican Americans view immigration. And the walls were, of course, we're Mexican American, we're not immigrants. But the mirrors was, these immigrants look like my dad and my mom and my grandparents. Walls and mirrors have to be revisited again. And actually, I would say that maybe it has to be extended to beyond Latinos, because we see in Minnesota these progressive white people talking about how they come from an immigrant background, and they identify with the victims, the people who were being picked up by ICE. So, in other words, the Huntingtons and Trumps and MAGA believers who are trying to reverse the clock, they're too late. They're much too late. Taco Bell and Chipotle have infiltrated American culture. Taco QCs happen throughout the country. Cinco de Mayo celebrations and tequila shots are ingrained practices now. And Bad Bunny performing the Super Bowl was the
Yeah.
Jorge Chapa, who was one of the members of the Chapek group, noted in one of his papers that even if the border was completely sealed and no more Mexicanos crossed, the Mexican origin population would nonetheless become the majority in the southwestern states in the near future. So, of course, now demography is not destiny. It involves organization. It involves envisioning a better future. It involves collective thinking and action. It started with a graduate student collective. So I believe this is a challenge that I do want to pass on to the next generation of scholars who are present. I've only given you a couple of pointers. There's a lot much more to flesh out. We're living in a very unique period that deserves analyzing.
Absolutely.
So I leave that challenge to ustedes.
Yay. I'm ready.
You all spoke for under 15 minutes. I feel really powerful.
They stayed in time.
Yeah, if you want to take your other 5 minutes, you. No, but thank you so much for all of your comments, and it's great to hear you in conversation across time and space with one another. One of the things that I was really thinking about as you were talking, all three of you in different ways, was the question of mentorship. And because I don't know how you think about mentorship in relation to one another, or if you think of each other more as scholarly peers.
I think we do good.
But it seems to me that there's been mentorship between you.
Whether they like it or not.
And I wonder if anyone wanted to comment on that with each other, or more broadly in the importance of that to your work.
Well, I had the good fortune of working closely with Juan Gomez Quiñones when CIMAS brought him here as a postdoc. And he worked with three of us historians, graduate students in history, for a year. Then he left. He took one of the three with him. The other two remained. I remained. But so I have had that experience, and it did really make a big difference in my life. Not only because he was learned and just was a good example in terms of the scholarship he produced, but because he was also caring. I tell students that when you choose a graduate program, know that there are very able people that can help you, but look for the person who has the capacity to guide you, but that is also approachable and nice. That really is the difference, and I was very fortunate. But I think that alongside mentorship, and I think you made reference to this, I think what's important is the collective. I think it's very important for people like graduate students, like young faculty, senior faculty, and community activists to get together. There is a lot to learn when you cross these lines of division. One of the first things you learn is how to build unity. And of course it starts with acknowledging the importance of the other, which is a major purpose in life. Seeing the worth of others and then acting accordingly. So I think the collective is important, like y'all's collective. I remember that you were very rigorous to the point of being very nasty with each other. But nobody left except for the group that you said that. But people work with that. In fact, I think one person, I don't remember who it was, came in with a book and said, before we critique each other's papers. Let's talk about this book, which advises the reader on how to be with each other in meetings of collaboration, and they made a big difference. I think collaboration with peers, I think, is very important because you learn together, you move together, and in the process you build unity and the trust that's necessary for the unity.
So you're talking about mentoring as opposed to being mentored? I mean, they're both ends.
Right.
Let me talk about the mentoring part. Although mentors obviously were important in my own trajectory, but I think again that graduate student collective that emerged from my seminar was very important. We were so engaged. We had questions that we wanted answered. That we were meeting regularly, and we weren't getting any class credit. I mean, this was all just labor of love, kind of passion, you know. And we learned, one of the important things that we learned in this collective experience, because we would go around, we would read and then go around and comment on whatever we were reading, was learning how to give criticism, constructive criticism, and also receive it. And you know, because that's what we needed. And so we would circulate our papers, and this was an important learning experience. We would rotate the chair, we would rotate the person who was taking notes. That kind of democratic process was very important. I think many of the participants carried on later in their own individual academic positions. I myself have always enjoyed writing groups, and I've been forming writing groups for the last 10 years. And again, these writing groups happen outside of the seminar or outside of the classroom. It's totally voluntary, but they're important. They're important to the participants because, you know, not only are we receiving criticism, constructive criticism, but we're also encouraging one another. I mean, we have support here. As you know, writing can be a very solitary endeavor, you know, and it's only sometimes when we get together in these kind of collective moments that we feel kind of encouragement, and you were told, yes, you're on the right track, keep going. I know it's difficult, but you can do it, you know. And so I think collective mentoring, maybe is another way of putting it, is important.
I think that's what Mr.
Wow,
does.
I will talk about both having been mentored and because I don't think I would have gotten through graduate school, to be quite honest with you, if I hadn't had Rebecca Scott as my mentor. And I just went to Michigan in November to be part of her retirement celebration, where she had a joint appointment in the law school and in the history department. And so there were about 30 or 40 of her former students, all Latin Americanists, many of them international students, doing countries, Cuba, Puerto Rico, but South America, Central America, Mexico. And I was one of the few who was a U.S. historian, right? Without a PhD in U.S. history, but in history department, but in American studies. I was invited, there were just a couple of us who were like that. And the rest of them were very, very prominent Latin Americanists. And I realized when they asked me to say something about what Professor Scott, Rebecca, we called each other by first names because we were the same age when I went to graduate school. I was a year older than she was. She said, and they said, you know, she doesn't like to get any praise. She's very not like that, you know. And so, and I realized that about her. But I did say to her, and she's sitting right in the audience, and I said, you know, I just, you know, and you remember when I thought I was going to leave graduate school, and you talked me into staying by telling me to get my rear into the library and just start checking out all these books that I just rattled off. I said, you got to do this because nobody can help you here. I can't help you with this, right? But you can do this because there are other people out there who have done it. And if you just do a good dissertation, you'll get a job. So I did. I did a good dissertation with her mentorship, enough to get me a job offer from UT, right? Because David was on the search committee.
This guy.
He did.
I'll tell you about it.
And I paid him for it, right?
I'm still waiting.
The check is in the mail. But there was a banner if you look at the AHA, graphs. 1990-91 was like the year to go on the job market. And I don't want to be a moderate here, but I did have other offers. And I knew I was going to take the Texas office because I'm doing a Texas dissertation, which hopefully be a book. So I turned down the other office too from the UC system, right? And I came because also David was there, and we made an offer at U Michigan when his book came out, when he was still at UNM with denied tenure, and I thought he might come. And the sociology department led the way, right? What was his name? That the professor was Jeffrey Page. Again, another person who was the same age as us. And I said, Jeffrey, you got to read this book. He read it, and he said, geez. And next thing you know, the sociology department is going to hire, send him a job offer, which he did. He came out and gave a job talk in the middle of a snowstorm, if I remember right. And so that kind of ended that. He went to UT because UT made him a job offer. And then I defended my dissertation 3 years after his book came out, 1990. And lo and behold, and this is how the universe works, folks. In 1991, they had a job for someone to teach Texas history. And Ricardo Roma had already known me because he tried to get me to come out there when he went on leave the year before I defended. He said, just come out here. You can work on your dissertation while you're out here and teach a class on Texas history and all that. I was all excited about it. I was so excited about it, And my Rebecca Scott said, no, don't do that, Neil. Do not do that. You stay right here and you get your doctorate done. You go over there, you're gonna want to teach, you're gonna do what you usually do, you're gonna overdo things, you're gonna be the best teacher, the best, and you're not gonna get your dissertation done. You sit here, I went, okay, I knew that the successes in my life was to find women who were smarter than me and take orders from them. So I did what she told. As much as I wanted to go, I said,
know a lot of people like that.
Professor Romo, I can't do that. He said, really? I said, no, I'm committed to finishing my dissertation here. But then I went out and gave a job talk, and lo and behold, I'm here. So how did I get mentored? So you know how I got to UT. How I started to get mentored was just my association, because this was before, Emilio, you didn't get to UT till later, right? I mean, you were in Houston, right?
Yeah, 2000.
Yeah,
2001.
So for 10 years.
Oh, 2000? Yeah.
Yeah, so for 10 years, I'm with Ramon, with David Montejano, with Jose Limon, with Ricardo Romo, Don Domenico Paredes, and we're having lunches at the Cactus Room every couple of weeks, right? And to me, that was a mentoring thing. For them, it was just colegas, and friends just shooting the shit. But for me, if that's recording, you can just bleep that out. For me, it was like listening. I just listened to these folks, right? Even though we're all the same age, and it was like, well, we were all a little bit younger than Don Domenico Paredes, but I would listen to them and read their works and think, what can I take from them, right? And I would talk to them if I had an issue or something and get feedback, right? So I was able, for the 6 years of that tenure track, to be mentored by colleagues, right? Who were also producing work that was really interesting to me. And they became my community, my mentoring community, right? And I remember many nights talking to David in his little getaway apartment behind his house about what happens after tenure. If I get tenure, how do I get tenure? He would explain all this stuff to me. He said, "Oh, wait till you get tenure. That's when you really, really are going to be pulled in all these different directions. And you got to worry about your family," because he knows my wife, and my 3 little girls and everything. And I think, they were people who were born academics who went to undergraduate and went to Yale, went and had a lot more experience in academia than I did. I had no experience, so I just listened and learned. So I wasn't much of a mentor until I got my own graduate school students after I got tenure, and I don't want to talk about that now, but you do all the things that you do, right? And the 4 graduate students that I'm advising right now, they're all Mexican Americans, right? 2 of them from San Antonio, you know who they are, and or 3 of them, and they're all doing really interesting projects, which I don't have time to go into, but that's one of the reasons I'm at SMU is we really do recruit and get a lot of Mexican American PhD students and MA students in our small program. And maybe not all the ones that we get into UT, right? But that's okay. We work with them and get them to where they can get their PhD and get out. Yeah.
So I'll ask one more question and then I'll pass it off to you all. So, not to make a history conference forward thinking, I'm looking at CJ a little bit nervously, because he doesn't like it when I'm presentist. But I am interested in thinking a little bit with the 3 of you. So, about this question, which is, one of the things I've been hearing a lot about this historical moment that we're in is a kind of, it's a well-meaning comment, and it's also a kind of throw up your hands comment, probably out of a place of fear, or I'm not sure, but it's the analysis that, the pendulum will swing back, right? So history as this back and forth. And with 3 historians, I want to hear how your view of history lands with that. What does that actually mean in practice? Because maybe it does swing back and forth. We can see evidence of that. But how does it get there? How much you have words of wisdom or comfort for us now?
Sure. I think, so the future's not predetermined. It can go in different directions. Yeah, I mean, we could become a fascist state in a few years if elections are postponed or, ICE shows up and they take the ballot boxes and history's not predetermined. On the other hand, the pendulum could swing back. Either Jasmine could become the next U.S. Senator or Tellerico. We don't know. I think the point though is that it's political, folks, and here I have to go back to the moment back in during the Hopwood period in 1996, when all of a sudden Hopwood abolishes affirmative action, and I happen to be the director of CMAS, and the students are threatening to take over buildings and so forth, and professors are writing, of course, signing petitions and things like that. None of that mattered. What mattered was my relationship with Senator Gonzalo Barrientos. That's what mattered. And I have to say, though, that we knew each other from the days when I was an undergraduate, all right? So we had a long history already. And when I came back as a professor, he was a senator. He wasn't a senator when I was an undergraduate. We were both. He was in Vista. I was an undergraduate. But now he's a senator. I'm a professor. I'm in a position to respond to Gonzalo's inquiry. What are we going to do, David? Can we do anything? Gonzalo put us in touch with Irma Rangel, who happened to be the chair of the House Higher Education Committee. The stars were lined up, man. I don't know how we could ever get such an alignment again, but they were lined up perfectly. Gonzalo organized 2 conferences that I'm aware of. There were a lot of meetings, but 2 conferences where we professors were invited to present alternative proposals to Hopwood. And there were 4 of us that presented proposals. I presented the top 10% plan. Others have presented different kind of approaches. But I think the point here was that there was a nexus here, a very important nexus between professors and the politicos.
Yeah.
And that was an important thing. Irma Rangel took
First
over.
class.
I mean, she had, I organized the professors. We had a
First class.
It's gone.
I had assembled a number of professors. We were all engaged in this. Irma Rangel called us her brain trust. And we would go over to her office and she would tell us to cut our hair. And she was like our matron, and but nonetheless she worked her magic, and with Gonzalo in the Senate, we passed the top 10% plan. It was amazing feat. I don't know where the caucus is now, but it's clearly, the nexus is not there. And that's what has to be restored.
Yeah.
And you have to find,
They're
there
not
are
doing
some
their
legislators that are very keen, very smart,
doing
very
their job.
astute, that I think that professors and graduate students here could work with.
I would add that there was well over 100 faculty members and graduate students from throughout the state that came to these meetings that advised indirectly the senators, senator, representative. And I can't help but think about a poem by Saracela Ramirez in about 1910, right before her death. She was a major poet and Magonista in South Texas, in Laredo to be more specific. And she wrote a poem and she had a line where she says, Mexicanos piensan en el ayer y contempla el futuro. Aún estamos muy lejos de la meta. Think about the past, look towards the future. We still have not reached that ideal, they call it ideal, that goal. The goal, she didn't have to define it, it's out there somewhere better than what we have now. It's basically, she was saying that, as David is saying, that the outcome of all of this depends a lot on what we do. What we do may not matter, but it may, and we won't find out until we do it. We are at the moment right now where we have to come together. I think that letter that we're going to write collectively is one gesture. We've also met with the legislators on the House and on the Senate side, they're friends, and we asked for hearings. They agreed in principle for something like a public meeting in March to start talking about how we move forward together and how they can assist us. We are already also talking to the legal counsel to National LULAC, and her words, we are looking at this situation, and we will make a determination on whether we will take this thing as a legal case, maybe to call for a stay or something. I don't know. We don't know. This thing about pendulum is not predictive at all. What is predictive is the passion with which a good number of us can move forward together in solid embrace with trust at the center. That's what struggle is. You have to work at it. It ain't going to happen by itself. And that's the only way to move forward, or at least the only thing that can give us hope is what we do for ourselves.
I certainly would like to echo the sentiments of Emilio and David. But going back to Carmen's question about, the swinging pendulum, right? And I think most of us would agree we're in a backlash situation, but whose pendulum are we talking about, right? I mean, there are pendulums and there are pendulums, right? So for us, we're on one end saying, this is the backlash, and the people who are behind Governor Abbott's, 1936 project, right? They're looking at the pendulum saying, yeah, we're winning. So we have different pendulums, right? and you could go and look at pendulums in every group, right? So for the Chinese in California, for example, in the 19th century, the pendulum is 1982 is like, oh my God, is this ever the backlash, right? Okay? And when does it swing to the other way? When that's lifted against the Chinese, it's 1943. Right? So there's a pendulum swing that takes a long time to get to where it needs to be for Chinese Americans, right? And so I think about these pendulum swings in sort of like communities who have ideas of how they want to be in America, how they want to belong, what it means to belong for their communities to feel safe in whatever states they're in, what other administrations are running the country. And so this is not just a call to arms for us, it's a way to think about who else is suffering from this pendulum swing, what other communities that we can build alliances with. And say, oh yeah, we think we got to look at what's going on in another part of the country, or with another group, say with African Americans, for example, right? Who their pendulum swung from slavery to freedom over the period of hundreds of years, right? But then if you look at their pendulums in individual places and spaces in the United States today, it's certainly not at the end of the freedom thing. It's certainly not back in slave days either. It's somewhere in between. And how do you move the pendulum? Which is, it doesn't just swing because there's some universal swing mechanism. We swing the pendulum.
Right.
It's us that moves the needle, right? And so I think my thoughts are look around and think, who can we build solidarities with, right? That's what I think.
Yeah. We try everything.
All right, so let's open it up to you. So I'm going to call like 3 people at a time, and each question, then I'll give it to you guys does that work? Okay. So back here, and then Angela, and then Des.
I've got a question for David Montejano. Because graduate students, your graduate experience, once you said that it was like a roller coaster ride. And a lot of their experiences are like roller coaster rides. Could you elaborate on that a little bit, please?
Professor Manuel Medrano, UC Brownsville, UT Brownsville, no longer, it's now UT Rio Grande, I guess. Some time ago, videotaped me and entitled the interview "The Roller Coaster." I guess I used the term roller coaster because folks today they see a successful author, right? I mean, you've read so many books, you've gotten awards, and you immediately think that it's been like just a straight line ascendancy. When it's not like that at all. It's been a roller coaster. It's been an up and down. Unlike Neil, who listened to his advisor's advice and finished the dissertation, I left Yale. My advisor said, "Don't go. You're not going to finish." But Berkeley was making an offer. Berkeley is making an offer, and New Haven. My God, the weather, 9 months of great overcast skies. I hated New Haven. My committee was all right, but I wanted to leave New Haven. And I had met all the requirements except the dissertation. I had a couple of chapters. But I went ahead to Berkeley. Well, lo and behold, what my committee predicted back at Yale happened. I didn't finish the dissertation, and I lost the job. So that was the first down, okay? And I lost the job because I changed the topic. Because I had already done this Chicano movement work, research, interviewed people, collected newspaper articles, hung out with the Brown Berets. That's what's going to be my topic. But when I get to Berkeley, the Chicano movement's falling apart. The Berets have gone underground. Ramsey Muniz, the leader of the Raza Unida party, has been arrested. It didn't look good.
Oh my God.
forward to this. This is my first year there at Berkeley. As I'm struggling on what to do, I met Paul Taylor, who already was familiar with his work, but I didn't know he was still alive. And moreover, I didn't know that his interviews were there at the Bancroft Library. I mean, and as he told me in our several conversations, he had only used 10% of the interviews that he had collected. The rest were there at the Bancroft. Once I went there,
I knew that.
I was hooked. I spent every free hour I had on campus at the Bancroft looking at these interviews. There were links to the past. You know, I didn't have to make up things, man. I didn't have to impute. You know, I didn't have to suggest that these segregation had somehow happened because people like to live together. You know? I didn't have to do that because I had interviews of the policymakers saying, we decided the Mexicans should live over here and Anglos over here. I mean, I had all that. I had interviews with the school, the superintendents, and saying, well, we let Mexicans out during cotton picking time because blah, 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 blah. All that. I had interviews that spoke of us in animalistic terms. I mean, it was racism a la brava. I mean, so I was hooked, and that's what I said, has to be my dissertation.
That's right.
Which eventually ends up becoming the book. But to switch topics like that, while you're teaching, and you have, Berkeley had given me a number of years to finish in order to maintain to keep the job. Well, I didn't finish, but I was dedicated to the project. And then, I lost the job. I was living under a bridge for about a year. And then I got a job at UC Santa Cruz. And the same thing happened again. I mean, this time though, I finished the dissertation, but they said that I had run out of the tenure clock. I mean, in other words, they weren't going to rehire me as a lecturer anymore.
Oh, no.
So, anyway, then I was so upset with academia that I left and I went to work with Willie Velasquez in San Antonio as a researcher. Willie Velasquez was the founder and leader of the Southwest Voter Registration Education Project. It was a welcome relief that I went there, back in San Antonio, regain my confidence that I had skills, I mean, you feel like you've been beaten down, I had skills that could be used in a very productive way. More importantly, Southwest Voter and Malda, that was next door, they had all this research, all these files that were just in their file cabinets that they had not analyzed because they didn't have time. Well, those files, that information ended up being the last two chapters of what ends up being Anglos and Mexicans in the making of Texas.
Wow.
All right, so I finished. Then I decided to go back into academia. Being at Southwest Voter is sort of iffy because they're reliant on grants, and you know how grants are. I get a job at the University of New Mexico. You want all the ups and downs here? Well, I'll finish with this. I go to the University of New Mexico in sociology. I'm an assistant professor. The book finally comes out. And now, I don't feel like I'm a newbie at this time. I mean, I've been at Berkeley and at Santa Cruz, and I've been working on this project, and I have the book in hand. And but in New Mexico, the faculty, I'm in sociology, they see me as a newbie. I mean, they see me as someone who just sort of, showed up and within a short period of time. And I think that's what got them, because I was sort of, they saw me as sort of being too aggressive, I guess, because in New Mexico, you have to spend a lot of time to, gain some kind of credibility, man. And here I had been, in 4 years, I go for tenure. I didn't wait for 7 years, I had the book. they turned me down. It was a shocker to me. I was turned down for tenure even though I had a book. I had followed all the, you have a book, a good book, and I was turned down. And yeah, I was pretty upset. But then 2 weeks later, I get word of the Frederick Jackson Turner Prize, the top prize in American history. 2 weeks later. And then other awards start coming in, and my colleagues in sociology me estaban dando vuelta, and they didn't want to face me, They didn't want to talk to me. They asked for a revote. I said, no, the book hasn't changed. And the dean was embarrassed because he had agreed to what the faculty had voted, and it took the president of UNM to overturn all of this. And they did offer me tenure, but by that time I'm getting offers from University of Michigan and Texas, and I decided to come back home at that time. So after that, then I was no longer lipping, I was just on the high. Okay.
I'm exhausted. I understand. Yeah, you have a mic or no?
We don't.
You don't have a mic? Okay.
High ever since, huh?
We're exhausted.
Yeah, no, I know you, Levy, and, I really like the story that you shared about the relationship with Gonzalo, and I know that you were also involved in the legislature in those years that you were here, bringing resources to the center and whatnot. And what I liked about that story was that it exemplified something so important about our work and what it does take to be successful and effective in our work. And it's those meetings that you attend, it's that advice that you provide, it's that it's that time that you spend in someone's office talking to their staff. It's going to City Hall, like we were there yesterday, trying to raise money for our academia about the academic program. And sometimes you wonder, what the heck am I doing here? And I got to be writing, I got to do all of those things. And I think what your story exemplifies. So I don't have a question, I just have a comment. Is that it's just so important to be in relationship, and it's something that Emilio said as well. And you never know. That's why history is contingent, because it's contingent on a diversity of factors. But a big part of that are these relationships, and sometimes you think about it as serendipity or synchronicity. But there's real just real magic that can happen. But you have to be open to it and just really see people as a possible avenue to something bigger and better. And I do want to also support what you said, Neil, about the importance of working interethnically and collaboratively. We did form an organization, Black Brown Dialogues on Policy, and we have been working as Black and Brown communities, civil rights. We need to support our civil rights community. I'm the Education Committee Chair for Texas LULAC. We need more people to join LULAC, okay? LULAC is only as good as we are, and also NAACP, and these organizations that could really benefit from our experience, and we can benefit from them as well, and be connected to the grassroots as well in the process. It's a small, like a little, like kind of painstaking. And you just never know what's going to come out of that, and just really wonderful things have happened. And I think the more that we just kind of think about, like policy and as a way of doing, as a way of living, I think that the more success we will have. And NOX, you mentioned NOX. The NOX conference is usually where we strategize for the legislature and the State Board of Education. We're meeting next Friday and Saturday at U of H Houston downtown, for those that can make it. Thanks.
I was trying to find a way to phrase this as a question. If you can't tell, Dr. Valenzuela is one of my mentors, but I have more of a statement. I think one thing that, as I'm Afro-Tejana, I'm Afro-Indigenous. My family, I come from a long line of Tejanas, Mexicanos, African people who were enslaved here in the United States. And as a black person, that comfortability never comes for us. We're always working because we're at the bottom of the totem pole. And before I continue, I want everybody to look around at how many black people are in here, right? And something that in a lot of these meetings and conversations is danced around is the 200,000 enslaved African people that were brought to Mexico. So when we talk about African Americans, technically because I was born here, I fall within that category, but I'm Afro-Latina, I'm Afro-Indigenous, right? And so that allyship, that relationship, it shouldn't be separated. And one thing that I've noticed is we got to this point because of a lack of accountability, right? That hyphen is a form of erasure. And so we can't hold each other accountable when we're misinformed or we're dancing around the truth. So when we talk about Afro-Tejanos, we also have to acknowledge that these people were also enslaved in Mexico and coming to Texas and these outside states, the same way indigenous people were coming to these states. I had no idea until I got to college that Mexicanos could be white. Like, it never crossed my mind. Everyone in my family is dark like me. And it was mind-boggling. And I come from sharecroppers on both sides. So I know what it's like to get my hands dirty and to pick crops and to raise cattle. And we got here because we're not understanding the difference between xenophobia and racism. And so we're confused about who we are as a people. And I wish I had a way to frame this as a question, and I'd like to hear what you guys think about it. But I'm not here to argue about which colonial power was less harmful and was better to live under, and this, that, and they're more safe. The same way Obama was a form of harm prevention, Obama was not the solution. Because America was still intended to enslave us. See, I wouldn't call myself free today. I call myself privileged for sure. But I'm not free. I spend all day working, I leave work, and I come and do more work, just like most of y'all.
We're not free.
And so we sit here and we call ourselves free and all these different things, and as an Afro-Indigenous woman, I don't feel free. I never felt free. And there was a history I couldn't ignore because I lived at that intersection. It's a queer experience for Afro-Indigenous people. And oftentimes in the books and in the conversations, we're ignored. But I have people in my family who are elders, 70-something, and I tell them every day, man, you black. You're darker than me, your hair is kinkier than mine, you got 4C hair. And I teach 8th grade U.S. history now at a school that is 92% Latino. Most of those students are Afro-Indigenous and don't even know it. Because they've nationalized themselves, and then we racialize nationalities. And I wish I had a question. But I think it's important for us to talk about that if we're talking about growth, this pendulum, this cycle, whatever you want to call it. I'm tired of a cycle.
Yeah.
I don't want my family in 100 years to be in the situation I'm in now, because there are days where I want to die. I work with kids who want to die. And it's not fun. And so I think moving forward as Latinos, as indigenous people, whatever you want to, as allies, however you choose to identify, we got to be conscious of that.
Well, Desiree, thank you for that. We're involved in that sweet embrace, I think. And I understand that we have to use these opportunities to remind each other about the responsibility we have to each other. And when I speak about us, I speak broadly. Us is who wants to gather to make change, regardless of background. That's what's more important, the will of the heart to move politically forward. Who comes to the call? Who answers the call for that sweet embrace of, a unified and effective movement? I wish we had a better representation. I think the organizers did as good a job as possible sometimes you just have to let that call float out there and see who responds. Ultimately, we all individually have the responsibilities, I've been saying, to move forward. That's what the call. And to take it seriously. It's a serious responsibility. It involves work. It involves disappointments. And I just love the way you use your words for unity. Thank you.
Right. More questions? Yeah.
Thank you all for the panel. Really appreciate it. David, you mentioned that you're kind of still baffled by this, or not baffled, you're still processing the 50% border patrol being Latino. And I think recently, looking at the numbers for ICE, and I think it's 30% Latino ICE agents, and that's only going up. And like many of us today, I was looking at my notes for your books, and I ran across this one section in Sancho's journal where you said, brown berets or brown shirts. And I think you were kind of wondering there, like, with these vatos that maybe have little opportunity and maybe are kind of trying to figure out where to go, that they could be fuel for fascism. Yeah. And I'm wondering if you all could reflect a little bit on this presence of Latinos in ICE, maybe thinking of that. Is this, I know the vatos are different from the people that are being recruited by ICE, but is this also a story about Latinos with little opportunity finding it in these places, or is it something kind of closer to what you said about assimilation? Just want to go.
So in Sancho's journal, yes, I have a question about, are these brown berets or brown shirts? And the reason I said brown shirts was because I witnessed this in El Paso, where I saw these vato locos, basically, thugs, I guess, who were recruited by a council candidate. And these vato locos were basically congregating outside of polling places and really looked terrifying for anyone walking through, because they would line up on both sides of the sidewalk that you had to walk through, you know? And the only, and that's what made me start thinking about brown shirts or brown, because these guys could have been beret recruits, you know? But here they were, acting in a very thuggish fashion. By the way, what busted that up was, these thugs, these vato locos are not very disciplined. One of the guys circling the block in his lowrider gets into an accident, opens the door, and all these beer cans fall out. Right in front of the polling place. That was the occasion for them, the cops, to come in and sort of clean up the stuff. But the question was there. And so I think it's a good question. And I think that's one that the next generation of scholars should try to address.